One of the biggest sources of conflict that we see has to do with neighbors and neighborhoods. And this could be anything from property lines to usage to noise to fences. Why does this happen? Well, usually you think of disputes having to do with domestic or relationship, family law cases, divorce, right? Separations, child support. Well, what's the closest long-term relationship you have besides your family? It's your neighbors, right? Your family is only different because they're inside your four walls, where the neighbor is just outside your four walls. That can create a lot of conflict over time. Look, a person that you don't know that does something annoying, you don't know it because you don't see them every day. If somebody at the grocery store you run into chews gum too loud, it's not going to bother you because in 5 minutes you're going to be away from them. Your neighbor, however, if they have some habit that they do you don't like, or they have an old junky car in their yard, or their fence is falling down, or maybe their dog barks too much, or whatever the problem is with your neighbor, or you just don't like them, you have to be exposed to that every single day of your life. And after months, years, it may add up and may wear on you. So this is where conflicts come up. Many times these turn into lawsuits, right? Over property lines, over usage, over junk cars, or a boat in the backyard, or somebody built a treehouse that's too high. Mediation is something that intervenes with these conflicts. And in fact, it's one of the areas of conflict that mediation can have the biggest effect, because usually it's not over some major large sum of money that has to be negotiated. Most lawsuits have to do with a claim against a person for money. If you lose on a contract, if you lose out on a business deal, that's money. That's easy to decide. Is it $50,000 or $60,000, right? It's negotiable. Usually, neighborhood or neighbor disputes have to do with something less tangible. How tall can I make my fence? What does the HOA say? That's a lot more vulnerable to being mediated, because the mediator can separate out the emotions, separate out the built-up frustration, and create a resolution that serves both parties. And here's an example. This article talks about an attorney who represents plaintiffs in insurance disputes. He's been in plenty of legal battles, but none prepared him for the acrimony or bad faith that happened when his neighbor put a fence across a shared driveway, right? All bets are off. Gloves are off, fists are up. So what do? Well, first thing you want to do is make sure that you understand the logic of the claim. Who's right, who's wrong? What does the law say? What does the HOA say? There's usually a gray area. That's why the other person's doing it. Sometimes there's not a gray area. We saw a case a few years ago where somebody was building a fence on their property. The other neighbor didn't like the looks of the fence, so they were throwing paint. They were, throwing, putting their hose on it, putting mulch, doing all kind of stuff to try to block the fence, and even putting up police tape to try to keep them from doing it. The last 2 years have made this problem worse. With the pandemic, we're home more now than we used to be. So we're exposed to whatever the problem is more. Plus, real estate has gone up in value where people don't want to move. Used to be that if you lived in a bad neighborhood or a place where you had problems, you could move. Now it's harder to move because there's less houses for sale, interest rates are too high, and there may not be a reason to because you're not changing your job. It creates more of a pressure cooker environment, and these cases are exploding. More of our mediation cases have to do with neighbor disputes increasing than any other type of case. You may be involved with one or close to involved with one. Look, your home is your castle. Where you look outside your windows and your four walls, that's your environment. Much of what you look at are other people's houses. And if there's something about their activity that you don't like, it can create a source of anxiety for you or a source of anger for you. You want to make sure you deal with that the right way. Get good legal advice if you need it, and consider getting a third-party, neutral, unbiased person to try to separate out the emotion, bring everybody back to reality, and come up with an answer that solves everyone's problems.